Welcome back to Fact or Fiction Horror Stories, the YouTube channel that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about evil. Each week, we bring you 3 disturbing stories that are either fact or fiction. We challenge you to distinguish the fine line between reality and nightmare. At the end of each episode, we will reveal which among them is indeed a chilling reality. So turn off the lights and brace yourselves to venture into the unknown, starting with story number 1. It's a story that still haunts me to this day, and I can assure you, it's not for the faint of heart. It all started with a young couple, let's call them Jack and Lily, who decided to take a romantic getaway to a secluded cabin in the woods. They had been planning this trip for months, and when they stumbled upon a beautiful Airbnb home nestled deep in the forest, they knew it was the perfect spot for their vacation. The cabin was everything they had dreamed of and more. It was cozy, with a rustic charm and surrounded by tall trees that provided a sense of privacy. The couple settled in quickly, unpacking their bags and taking in the peaceful surroundings. But little did they know, their peaceful getaway would soon turn into a nightmare. It all started on their first night in the cabin. Jack and Lily were cozied up in bed listening to the sounds of the forest outside. But then, they heard something that sent chills down their spines. It was a faint whisper, like someone was speaking right outside their bedroom window. Jack dismissed it as the wind, but Lily couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The next day, as they were exploring the nearby trails, they stumbled upon an old abandoned house. It was a dilapidated building with broken windows and a creaky front door. Jack and Lily were intrigued, and being the adventurous couple they were, they decided to take a closer look. As they approached the house, they noticed something strange. The front door was slightly ajar, as if someone had been inside recently. Against Lily's better judgment, they entered the house, and what they found inside made their blood run cold. The walls were covered in strange symbols and markings, and the air was thick with an eerie energy. Jack and Lily quickly made their way out of the house, feeling as if they were being watched the entire time. That night, as they were getting ready for bed, they heard the whispering again. This time, it was louder and more distinct. Jack got up to check outside, but there was no one there. Lily was convinced that something was trying to communicate with them, and she couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that had settled in her gut. The next morning, Jack and Lily decided to cut their trip short and head back home. But as they were packing their bags, they noticed something strange. The symbols and markings from the abandoned house were now etched onto the walls of their cabin. It was as if they were being followed by an unseen force. As they were driving back home, things only got worse. They started seeing strange figures standing on the side of the road, watching them as they drove by. Lily even saw a woman in a white dress standing in the middle of the road, but when Jack looked back, she was gone. They were both on edge, and they couldn't wait to get back to the safety of their own home. But the nightmare was far from over. When they arrived home, they found that their house had been ransacked. The same symbols and markings from the abandoned house and their cabin were now all over their walls, and in the middle of their living room, there was a note that read, "You can run, but you can't hide." Jack and Lily were terrified and didn't know what to do. They called the police, but they found no evidence of a break-in. The couple was convinced that whatever had been following them had somehow made its way into their home. They decided to stay with Lily's parents for a few days, hoping to escape whatever was haunting them. But even there, they couldn't escape the strange occurrences. Lily's parents' house was now covered in the same symbols, and they could hear the whispering at night. Finally, after weeks of living in fear, the couple decided to seek help from a paranormal investigator. The investigator revealed that the symbols and markings were from an ancient ritual that was used to summon spirits, and the whispering they had been hearing was the voice of a vengeful spirit who had been summoned by the previous guests of the Airbnb home. Jack and Lily were horrified. They had unknowingly stayed in a haunted house, and now they were being tormented by a vengeful spirit. The investigator performed a cleansing ritual, and the couple never returned to that cabin in the woods again. So, my friends, the next time you're looking for a cozy Airbnb home, make sure you do your research. You never know what kind of spirits might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to haunt unsuspecting guests. And as for Jack and Lily, well, they still have nightmares about their bone-chilling experience in that secluded cabin in the woods. Which leads us into our second story. So let me tell you about this bone-chilling event that happened to a family who moved into a new house. They were the Johnsons, a typical American family, with a mum, dad, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl. They had been living in their old house for years, but decided it was time for a change and found a beautiful new house in a quiet neighborhood. The house was perfect, spacious, modern, and with a big backyard for the kids to play in. The Johnsons were thrilled and couldn't wait to move in. They hired a moving company and got everything settled in just a few days. But that's when things started to get strange. The first night in their new house, the Johnsons heard strange noises coming from the basement. It sounded like someone was walking around down there, but when they went to investigate, there was no one there. They brushed it off as their imagination and went back to bed. But the next night, the noises were even louder. This time, the Johnsons were sure they heard whispers and giggles. They were starting to get a little spooked, but they didn't want to scare their kids, so they decided not to mention it. However, things only got worse from there. The Johnsons started experiencing strange things around the house. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close by themselves, and sometimes they would catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure out of the corner of their eye. The kids started having nightmares and refused to sleep in their own rooms. The Johnsons tried to reassure them that it was just their imagination, but deep down they were starting to believe that something was not right about their new house. One day, the Johnsons decided to do some digging into the history of their house. They found out that the previous owners had moved out after only a few months, claiming that the house was haunted. The Johnsons were shocked and didn't know what to do. They decided to call in a paranormal investigator to see if they could get to the bottom of things. The investigator, Mr. Smith, arrived at the house and immediately felt a strange energy. He set up his equipment and started his investigation. After a few hours, Mr. Smith called the Johnsons into the living room. He showed them some footage from his cameras and they were horrified. The footage showed the ghostly figure of a little girl playing with toys in the kids' room. But what was even more disturbing was the voice that could be heard on the recording. It was the voice of a little girl saying, "I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to play with someone." The Johnsons were terrified and didn't know what to do. Mr. Smith explained that the little girl's spirit was trapped in the house and she was trying to communicate with them. He suggested that they try to find out who the little girl was and help her move on to the other side. The Johnsons were hesitant, but they didn't want to live in a haunted house, so they agreed to help. They went to the local library and started researching the history of their house. They found out that the previous owners had a daughter who had gone missing when she was only 7 years old. Her name was Lily, and she had disappeared without a trace. The Johnsons were shocked and felt a sense of sadness for the little girl. They decided to hold a séance in their house, hoping to make contact with Lily and help her move on. During the séance, they were able to communicate with Lily's spirit. She told them that she had been playing in the backyard when she fell into a well and couldn't get out. Her parents had never found her, and she had been trapped in the house ever since. The Johnsons were able to help Lily's spirit move on to the other side, and from that day on, the strange occurrences in their house stopped. The kids were able to sleep in their own rooms again, and the Johnsons finally felt at peace in their new home. But the experience had left a lasting impact on them. They couldn't believe that they had been living with the spirit of a little girl for so long. They were grateful that they were able to help her find peace but they couldn't shake off the feeling of unease whenever they thought about their new house. So, that's the story of the Johnsons and their new house. It just goes to show that sometimes things are not always as they seem. You never know what secrets a house may hold, so be careful when you're looking for a new place to call home. You never know what kind of spirits may be lurking in the shadows. If you thought that was spooky, wait until you hear our last story. This one will make you think twice before ordering from DoorDash again. Let's begin. Lily was a busy college student, always on the go and constantly juggling classes, work, and a social life. She barely had time to cook, let alone sit down and eat a proper meal. So, like many of us, she turned to food delivery apps to satisfy her hunger. And that's where her nightmare began. One night, Lily was studying for an exam when she suddenly got a craving for some Chinese food. She opened up her DoorDash app and browsed through the options. As she scrolled, she came across a new restaurant that she had never seen before. It had a strange name, the Forbidden Palace, and the menu items were all written in a language she couldn't recognize. But, being adventurous and hungry, Lily decided to give it a try. She placed her order and eagerly waited for her food to arrive. As she sat at her desk, studying, she heard a knock on her door. She jumped up, thinking her food had arrived, but when she opened the door, there was no one there. Confused, she checked her phone and saw a notification from DoorDash saying that her food had been delivered. Puzzled, Lily looked around her apartment complex, but there was no sign of a delivery person. She shrugged it off, thinking it must have been a glitch in the app, and went back to her studies. But as the night went on, strange things started happening. Lily kept hearing strange noises coming from her kitchen, like someone was rummaging through her cabinets. She got up to investigate, but there was no one there. She brushed it off as her imagination and went back to studying. But then she heard footsteps in her hallway, getting closer and closer to her bedroom. She could feel her heart racing as the footsteps stopped right outside her door. She was too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. Suddenly, the doorknob started turning, as if someone was trying to get in. Lily screamed and jumped out of bed, ready to defend herself. But when she opened the door, there was no one there. She searched her apartment, but it was empty. She even checked the front door, but it was still locked. She was completely alone. Shaken, Lily decided to call it a night and try to get some sleep. But as she was drifting off, she heard a faint whisper in her ear. It sounded like a language she had never heard before, and it sent chills down her spine. She turned on her bedside lamp, but there was no one there. The next morning, Lily woke up with a feeling of unease. She couldn't shake off the events of the previous night. She decided to do some research on the restaurant she had ordered from, the Forbidden Palace, but when she searched for it on Google, no results came up. It was like the restaurant didn't exist. Feeling a sense of dread, Lily decided to delete the DoorDash app and never order from there again. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. She would still hear whispers in her ear, footsteps in her hallway, and even see shadows moving in her peripheral vision. She couldn't explain it, and it was starting to take a toll on her mental health. One day, while walking on campus, Lily saw a flyer for a new Chinese restaurant. It had the same name, the Forbidden Palace, and the menu items were all written in the same strange language. She couldn't believe it. Was it a coincidence? Or was this restaurant somehow connected to the one she had ordered from through DoorDash? Lily decided to confront the owner of the restaurant. She went in and asked to speak to the manager. When the manager came out, Lily was shocked to see that it was the same delivery person who had supposedly delivered her food that fateful night. He had a sinister smile on his face as he asked her how she liked her meal. Feeling a surge of fear, Lily ran out of the restaurant and never looked back. She never ordered from DoorDash again, and to this day, she still gets chills whenever she thinks about that night. Was it all just a coincidence, or was there something more sinister at play? We may never know, but one thing is for sure, Lily will never forget her terrifying encounter with the DoorDash delivery. And now, my viewers, let's recap the stories that were either inspired by actual events or ones that were completely false. Do you have an idea of which story was true? Starting with the story of an Airbnb home. Is it true or false? Well, this one is false, just an urban legend. And how about the story of the DoorDash delivery? Is this true or false? Well, this one is also false. And lastly, the story of the new house. Is it true or false? Well, this one was indeed based on a true story, my friends. So beware. I hope you were able to separate reality from nightmares during this episode. Put in the comments below which one you thought was fact. And did you get it right? Join us in the next video on your screen for more fact or fiction horror stories.